Act Two of The Merchant of Venice. So we pick up with Portia coming face to face with one of her first suitors. It's the Duke of Morocco who comes, and she tells Morocco the following: "You must take your chance and either not attempt to choose at all, or swear before you choose, if you choose wrong, never to speak to lady afterward in way of marriage. Therefore, be advised." And so, one of the themes that we might notice across the board is this idea of men taking risks, right? Um, Men hazarding to gain not only fortune but also to gain women as well. And this seems to be a recurrent theme in this play, right? Just as Antonio is hazarding his ships overseas, so too we talked about men sort of moving outward from Venice and having their ships in the Indies, in America, in various ports. Wherever men venture outward from Venice, they must take risks, they must hazard. And so too in the opposite direction as well. We mentioned Portia as being sort of having sort of a gravitational pull. And all the men who come to Venice also must do the same kind of risk taking and hazarding. And of course, Aragon chooses the golden casket because one of the things that he thinks of is he weighs Portia's worth relative to his own. And so he says to himself, "I'm as good as gold, and therefore she must be as well." And so he considers his own worth in choosing the golden casket. And so in putting his own worth before that of Portia, he makes the wrong decision, right? And his risk, what he's hazarded, is that he will never be able to marry again afterward. After he's lost Portia, he will forever have to swear that he will not marry any future woman. Act 2, Scene 2 continues sort of a trend that's taking place in the play, which is this trend of the relationship between parents and children. We've seen some of this, haven't we, with Titus Andronicus, and there's some interesting little parallels between parents and children in Titus Andronicus and in this play as well. Lancelot is speaking to his father, old Gobbo, and of course Lancelot right now is a servant to Shylock, and he is dissatisfied not only with his service to Shylock, but he's also dissatisfied with his dad as well. In an aside, he says about his father, who is blind, right? "Oh heavens, this is my true begotten father, who being more than sand blind, high gravel blind, knows me not, I will try confusions with him." And there's a little scene of a practical joke where Lancelot tricks his blind father into believing that he's dead. A real nice son, right? And so he has this exchange with his dad. "Do I look like a cudgel or a hovel post, a staff or a prop? Do you know me, father?" "Alack the day, I know you not, young gentleman, but I pray you tell me, is my boy, God rest his soul, alive or dead?" "Do you not know me, father?" "Alack, sir, I'm sand blind, I know you not." "Nay, indeed, if you had your eyes, you might fail of the knowing me. It is a wise father that knows his own child." And so, although it's a cruel joke to play on your blind father, nevertheless, this line that he speaks to old Gobbo, "It is a wise father that knows his own child," it reminds us, right, of the relationship between Portia and her father, right? Portia's father also does not know his own child, right? He doesn't know how much Portia longs to choose a husband for herself. And so with Portia and her dad, and now with Lancelot and old Gobbo, this seems to be a trend that's forming, isn't it, right? This trend of a strained relationship between parents and children, where parents do not recognize the needs and desires of their own children. And we will see this continue with Shylock and Jessica, won't we? But anyway, the play gives us Gobbo and old Gobbo perhaps to bring the point home, right? And just as Lancelot is dissatisfied with one member of the elder generation, dissatisfied with his dad, and also with Shylock, he's dissatisfied, in fact, with two members of the parents' generation, right? There's a general dissatisfaction. So just as he is cruel towards his own dad, when he looks at the older Shylock, he says, "My master is a very Jew. Give him a present, give him a halter. I'm famished in his service. You may tell every finger I have with my ribs. Father, I'm glad you are come. Give me your present to one Master Bassanio, who indeed gives rare new liveries. If I serve not him, I will run as far as God has any ground. Oh, rare fortune, here comes the man. To him, Father, for I am a Jew, if I serve the Jew any longer." So there are two things to note over here. First of all, this kind of negative attitudes towards Jews kind of predominates the play, right? And this negative attitude has to do, Lancelot's not happy with how much he's getting paid, what kind of recompense he's getting from Shylock. And look who he turns to, right? He turns to Bassanio. It's true, Bassanio does give rare new liveries to all who serve him, but we already know what kind of a prodigal person Bassanio is, right? One of the reasons why he's gotten into so much debt is that he doesn't know how to be wise with his money, right? He's a real spendthrift as opposed to Shylock, who is very, very cautious, right? And this cautiousness about his money is turned into a stereotypical statement of the Jewish character being very, very stingy. So again, what may be a good quality is in fact turned into a stereotypical quality. And so Lancelot wishes to escape not one but two members of the older generation. And right after that, Shakespeare gives us Jessica, right? I'm sorry thou wilt leave my father so. Our house is hell, and thou a merry devil. Didst rob it of some taste of tediousness, but fare thee well. There is a ducat for thee in Lancelot. Soon at supper shalt thou see Lorenzo, who is thy new master's guest. Give him this letter, do it secretly, and so farewell. Would not have my father see me in talks with thee. And in a soliloquy at the end of Act 2, Scene 3, she says, "Alack, what heinous sin is it in me? To be ashamed to be my father's child, and though I am daughter to his blood, I am not to his manners. O Lorenzo, if thou keep promise, I shall end this strife to become a Christian and thy loving wife." And so this word blood is mentioned for the first time over here, but not the last time. And so Shylock's daughter, who is a daughter to his blood, but nevertheless does not want to be his child anymore, right? And instead, she wishes to leave him, right? And instead convert and become Lorenzo's loving wife. And so we have repeated instances of members of Shylock's household wanting to leave him, right? First Lancelot, and now Jessica. There seems to be a mass exodus away from Shylock's home. Everyone wants to go over to the Christian side. Graciano and Lorenzo talk about the plan that will get Jessica out of Shylock's home. Was not that letter from fair Jessica? I must needs tell thee all. She hath directed how I shall take her from her father's house, what golden jewels she is furnished with, what page's suit she hath in readiness. If ever the Jew her father come to heaven, it will be for his gentle daughter's sake, and never dare misfortune cross her foot, unless she do it under this excuse, that she is issue to a faithless Jew. Come, go with me, peruse this as before, as thou goest. Fair Jessica shall be my torch-bearer. And so we have a repetition of another kind here as well, right? Jessica shall be my torch-bearer. And this should remind you, right, of Act 1, Scene 1, right, where many Jasons, right, came in search of the golden fleece, right? So this idea of women being a commodity that advance men in fortune, right? Just as Portia will do that to Bassanio, here it is Lorenzo, right, who calls Jessica his torchbearer, and that when Jessica absconds from Shylock's house, she is going to take his gold and jewels with him, right? So women not only being commodities, but women also bringing commodities. And the exchange of wealth in this play, right, seems to be a one-way exchange of wealth from Jew to Christian, right? There seems to be a pattern of behavior where wealth continuously leaves the Jew and enters into the domain of Christendom. And we'll have to ask ourselves why that might be so. Remember what we read about in Act 1, Scene 1. We talked about the world as a stage, right? Where every man must play his role. And so it seems like Jews have certain roles to play in Venice, and Christians have certain roles to play in Venice. What would we say the role of the Jew is in Venice? And what would we say the role of the Christian is, apparently, in Venice? That's a question that I'll leave you to think about. Now, Shylock deals with the loss of Shylock deals with the loss of Lancelot's service, and he takes it in stride. This patch is kind enough, but a huge feeder. Snail slow and profit, and he sleeps all day. More than the wildcat drones, hive not with me. Therefore I part with him, and part with him to one that would have him help to waste his borrowed purse. Well, Jessica, go in. So Shylock is okay with the idea of losing Lancelot because Lancelot is snail slow and he sleeps all day. And what's the point of having someone like this as a servant? So Shylock is okay with losing the service of Lancelot, but what he doesn't want to lose is Jessica, and he tries to keep Jessica locked away, right? And we talked about this idea of women as property, and certainly if the Christian men treat women as property, so too does the Jewish man Shylock tell Jessica to lock herself and, of course, the jewelry that she's supposed to be associated with away in Shylock's home. In the scene of eloping, Act 2, Scene 6, interestingly enough, not only does Jessica leave the house with Shylock's wealth, here, catch this casket, it is worth the pains. I'm glad 'tis night, you do not look at me, for I am much ashamed of my exchange, but love is blind, and lovers cannot see the pretty follies that themselves commit. So interestingly, not only does she elope with Lorenzo, but she takes Shylock's wealth, his gold and his coins and his ducats, as she steals that away from him as well. And so there is a movement of both women and wealth from Jew to Christian, right? And interestingly enough, when Jessica absconds, she does not do it in her own appearance, but rather she cross-dresses. And this is not the first time we've seen a woman cross-dressed, right? Remember, of course, Viola and Cesaria, right? So one of the things we may want to think about is what function is disguise serving here? We've talked about disguise all semester long, right? Going all the way back to Henry IV, Part 1, right? Where Prince Hal is in a kind of disguise. And then we talked about disguise in the previous play. We've talked about numerous instances of disguise. What would you say the function of Jessica's disguise is? She dresses up as a young boy so that no one will recognize her leaving with Lorenzo. It will not. It will be above suspicion that Lorenzo is leaving with this young boy by his side. Obviously, so if it's a woman, people will take note of it. So, in part, dressing as a boy allows them to escape undetected. Certainly that. But we may want to think to ourselves as well. In what way Jessica and Lorenzo consider disguise? For them, what is disguise? And it seems like it is a very utilitarian thing. So you are sweet, even in the lovely garnish of a boy, but come at once, for the close night doth play the runaway, and we are stayed for at Bassanio's feast. I will make fast the doors and gild myself with some more ducats. And so one of the things we may note is that if disguise is utilitarian for Jessica, then we learn something more about Jessica in these lines. And she offers to gild herself with some more ducats. And so, if women are property, some women are obviously not okay with being property, right? So, some women don't appreciate being treated as property, i.e. Portia, and other women are fine with being associated with property. Here Jessica says that she's going to gild herself. She's going to make herself into gold with some more of Shylock's ducats. And so some women don't appreciate being treated as property, and some women associate themselves with property. And so it's interesting to think about Portia and Jessica, right? Because both of these women cross-dress, don't they? We haven't talked about Portia cross-dressing, but she will cross-dress later. And so one of the things we may want to think about is, how does their self-image of themselves get reflected when they assume male guise? That's one of the things that you want to think about for later on. In Act 2, Scene 7, Morocco comes, and of course we talked about this already. He chooses the wrong casket. All that glitters is not gold, he learns. In Act 2, Scene 8, Shylock learns of exactly what's happened, and Salanio narrates his reaction, right? Shylock's reaction to learning that not only has his daughter eloped with Lorenzo, but she's taken money from him in the process. I never heard a passion so confused, so strange, outrageous, and so variable, as the dog Jew did utter in the streets, "My daughter, oh my ducats, oh my daughter, fled with a Christian, oh my Christian ducats, justice, the law, my daughter, and my ducats, and my daughter, a sealed bag, 2 sealed bags of ducats, of double ducats, stolen from me by my daughter, and jewels, 2 stones, 2 rich and precious stones, stolen by my daughter, justice, and find the girl, she had stones upon her knees, and the ducats." And so this conflation of daughter and ducats, right, we talked about earlier, right, adds to this idea of women and property being indissociable. And this seems to be pan-religious, right? It is an attitude that is held by men of both religions. And so, although Christianity and Judaism may be a source of distinction in certain regards, as far as money is concerned, the treatment of women elicits from all men a common reaction. And so that's one thing for us to think about, is different forms of identity. And the different forms of identity the play brings to our attention is religious identity, it is gender identity, it is also the identity of wealth, right, in terms of borrowers or takers and lenders, right? And we've seen that certainly the Christians often fall into the category of being borrowers. Not always, right? In Act 2, Scene 9, Aragon comes, and Aragon basically, again, does something very similar to what Morocco did. I will not choose what many men desire, because I will not jump with common spirits and rank me with the barbarous multitudes. Why then to thee, thou silver treasure house, tell me once more what title thou dost bear? Who chooseth me shall get as much as he deserves, and well said too, for who shall go about to cousin fortune and be honorable without the stamp of merit? And so he decides that all men out there will choose gold. Instead, he doesn't want to be like all men out there. He wants to be unique, and so he chooses silver. And by the time Act 2 ends, there's a certain element of suspense that is removed, right? Because the possibility of Portia's name being in the golden casket is removed by the Morocco choice, and the possibility of Portia's name being in the silver casket is removed by the Aragon choice. And so in Act 3, when we see Bassanio coming to choose from among the three caskets, we audience members already know which of the three caskets Portia's name is going to be contained in. And so removing the suspense allows us then to focus in not on where her name is, but in how Portia and Bassanio interact with one another and with the casket during that moment of choosing. So that's what we'll pick up with next time when I lecture on Act 3.